Now is Marvin Barth. Good to see you, Marvin, founder of Thematic Markets. It's been a while, sir. So here we are with Powell, Kugler assuring us that, well, Powell assuring us the rate cuts are coming and we should not be distracted by bumps in the road. And then we have a 1-2 punch that inflation can be tamed without something systemically going wrong in the employment market. Where do you stand on the taming of inflation, bringing inflation back to heel without a major disruption? Good morning, Marvin.
Good morning, Manus. It's nice to be with you again. Look, I actually stand in both camps, if that sounds strange. I don't think that Chair Powell is correct. I don't think they're going to be cutting, certainly not 3 times this year. If they do cut, it's maybe a maximum of 1 time. Just the economy and inflation are not going to cooperate on that front. The final mile for inflation is going to be difficult. But the economy is booming. It is doing fantastically well. So the hard landing scenario isn't there either. So actually, Governor Kugler is actually correct. But, you should not pay attention to the Fed's forecast. They've been wrong this entire cycle. Why should you start paying attention to them now? They've been 100% wrong the entire time.
They've been 100% wrong. Therefore, the dots. So I'm going to go with your thesis, Marvin. These are not my subjective opinions. I'm extrapolating your thesis. So they've been 100% wrong all of the time. The dots are completely wrong. The guidance is completely wrong. I mean, are you throwing everything out, Marvin? Because that, I'd have to challenge that a little bit. Come on.
No. Oh, okay. Well, tell me the last time they were right. I mean, they haven't.
To be fair, they got transitory wrong. To be fair, they've been promising that we're going to make the last mile down. Okay, let's contain ourselves. So if they're wrong and they're not cutting, I want to take that into markets. This mini backup that you had in yields this week, does that go much further and extend much higher if there are no rate cuts coming and inflation is, as you say, going to be sticky and the Fed is wrong?
Well, look, I think the underlying problem here is that people have the wrong model for what R-star is. They're still trying to use the Laubach-Williams model and listen to the Fed. The Fed is very dependent on that model. That model has been consistently wrong, and that's why they keep getting it wrong. And markets are using the same model. Most of the economists that you're going to have come on here from any of the big banks are going to use the Laubach-Williams model as their measure of the neutral interest rate. Now, if actually neutral interest rates are sustainably higher, which the fact that the economy is booming amid high real interest rates right now is telling you that indeed the neutral rate is higher. I mean, it's obviously the fact there. And so what's happening is, you're right, exactly as the Fed keeps trying to forecast, oh, we're going to be able to cut. Markets have also, if you look at one year forward rates, they have been consistently wrong for the past 3 years. They have not come down the way that the markets expected, and I think that's still the case now. It still makes sense to be a payer of one year rates, to be short 2-year bonds.
What does it mean for this equity market then? Because I've had everybody come on the show and go, you don't need to worry about rate cuts. That's not going to push equities higher. And if I take your thesis, we're booming. Unemployment is low. Everybody has jobs. We're getting wage cuts. So no rate cuts is not a distraction to the momentum and trajectory of U.S. equity markets.
Yeah, well, let's think about what actually is behind neutral rates. And this actually gets to the fundamental problem with the Laubach-Williams model. The Laubach-Williams model seems to derive, not seems to, it actually does derive the neutral rate from the rate of inflation. That's not where neutral rates come from. Neutral rates come from the marginal product of capital. If we're having a productivity boom that is starting to show up now in the data, that's driving this big capex boom that has actually been going on for 10 years now, then what should happen is earnings go up and real interest rates go up. And that's exactly what we've seen. So equities actually are going to do perfectly fine through this.
So are we in, you talk about a productivity shift, are we in the birth of that, Marvin? If we spent 3 months now obsessing about AI, it's coming more alive every day. We talk about it in a different way. So how much productivity improvement do you think that we're going to see? Is it going to continue? And are we at some kind of paradigm shift in productivity, to coin a phrase from another great central banker?
Well, I go back to my American roots, even though I'm here in London. I'm gonna use a baseball analogy, not a cricket analogy. We're in the middle innings, right? So to me, this feels very much like when I was at the Fed back in the 1990s, when people were still debating, are we actually having a productivity miracle? Because it hadn't shown up in the data yet. Now, of course, we saw that it was there, but it took a while for it to show up in the data. That's exactly where we are, where we are now. And it's not about AI. The thing that's been driving this has been automation all along. What people have thought was deglobalization that was politically driven was never politically driven. That may have added to it. COVID added to it, of course. What's been driving it is it's actually cheaper to use robots and automation in the U.S. than it is to use an outsourced globalized supply chain. And that's been going on for 10 years. You can see it in the data.
Does that accelerate if we get a change in political complexion in the United States of America? Of course, what I'm referring there to is if there's a shift from Biden to Trump and to a GOP sweep. Does that thesis that you put forward, does that accelerate over the next 4 years, if that is the outcome, Marvin?
I think the bigger accelerant was twofold. It was one, COVID teaching businesses that indeed the costs of disruption from an outsourced globalized supply chain were incredibly high, and that they could do it just as cheaply with robots now. So that was a big one. But also, I know that a lot of Biden fans are really going to be upset about this, and I don't remember who coined the term, but Biden's policies are basically polite Trumpism. So I'm not sure there's a big difference there.
Marvin, what a way to sort of circle off and leave the conversation there. You managed to get baseball in and a bit of politics. Listen, it's great to have you back on the show. Do come and join us. And when you're in New York, feel free to get up early and join Danny and myself. That is Marvin Barth, Thematic Markets, my guest.